Once upon a time, in a big and happy kingdom, there lived a kind king who was known for his gentle heart and fair decisions. He cared deeply for his people, always trying to make them happy and keep them safe. Next to him was a wise minister who was smart and clever, and everyone admired him. Together, they worked hard to bring peace and prosperity to their land, often having interesting talks about the problems they faced and how to solve them. One cold winter day, the king decided to visit the town to see how the people were doing. As the king with minister walked through a street, the king noticed a young child, around 4 years old, walking beside her mother. The child was shivering in the bitter cold, holding her mother's hand tightly. Both of them wore thin, old clothes that did little to keep out the winter chill. The king stopped and asked the woman,
"Where is your husband? Why do you not have warm clothes for your child?"
The woman looked down sadly.
"Your Majesty, my husband passed away last year. I work as a maid in many houses, but it barely covers food and shelter. I have no money left for warm clothes."
The king's heart grew heavy with sympathy. He looked at the minister, who nodded in agreement. Turning to the woman, the king said,
"From this day on, you and your child shall receive a monthly stipend from the palace. You will also be given warm clothes to keep you safe during the winter."
The woman's eyes filled with gratitude as she looked at the king.
"Thank you, Your Majesty."
The king smiled kindly.
"Take care of your child, and do not worry. We will help you."
The king turned to his guards.
"Bring warm clothes for this woman and her child,"
he ordered.
"She will get a regular stipend from the palace each month."
The guards bowed and went to carry out his orders. The king and the minister turned to leave. One night, the king and the minister were roaming around in the palace. It was very chilly. A thought struck the minister's mind. He said,
"Your Majesty, I believe that a man can do anything for the sake of money."
But the king disagreed with him. They were passing by a pond. The king dipped his hand into the cold water. He asked the minister,
"Do you think that a man can stand in this cold water the whole night for money?"
"Of course. I can find one, if you say,"
said the minister. The king accepted the challenge.
"If any man is able to pass a night in the icy cold water, I shall give him 1,000 gold coins,
said the king. At night, the minister set out to find a man who would accept the king's challenge. As he walked through the streets, he came across a vendor selling vegetables under a flickering lantern.
Good evening,
said the minister.
Would you be willing to spend the whole night standing in cold water for a reward of gold?
The vendor shook his head, his face filled with concern.
No, sir. I need to keep warm to sell my vegetables. I can't risk my health for gold.
The minister smiled kindly.
Okay. Thank you.
The minister continued his search. He saw a man selling boiled eggs. The man was shivering and trying to keep warm in the cold night. The minister approached him and asked,
Good evening. Would you be willing to spend the whole night in cold water for a reward?
The man looked up, his eyes wide with hope.
Yes. I will accept this challenge. I am very poor. During the day, I polish shoes and repair them. But I can't earn enough to make ends meet.
The minister smiled.
You might just have the strength to do it. Good luck.
The man nodded.
Thank you. I will do my best for the reward.
The next day, the minister brought the poor and lean man to the court. The king said,
Very well. Minister, escort this man to the pond. And if he succeeds, I will reward him as I promised.
The man and the minister left. But the king sent his guards after the man to ensure he didn't cheat. To the king's surprise, the man completed the challenge. The next morning, the man returned to the palace to claim his reward. The king asked the man how he managed to stand in the cold water. The man said,
Your Majesty, I saw a lamppost at a distance. I kept looking at it, and its heat made me complete the challenge.
The king got furious and refused to reward the man, saying,
That means you were not completely in the cold water. Hence, you will not receive the reward.
The man left the court with disappointment. The minister was surprised at the king's action. The next day, he didn't come to the court. The king got worried. He sent a courtier to bring the minister. The courtier came back and told the king that the minister was cooking rice pudding and would be back only after eating it. He waited for the minister till evening, but he was nowhere to be seen. As the king grew impatient, He himself went to look for the minister at his house. When the king reached the minister's house, he saw a pot placed almost 10 feet away from the fire. The king was confused and asked,
"What are you doing?"
The minister smiled and replied,
Your Majesty, I'm cooking rice pudding for my children. They have been craving it.
"Really? How do you make it?"
the king inquired, leaning closer to see.
First, I poured milk into the pot.
The minister explained.
Then I added the rice and some sugar to sweeten it.
The king laughed.
"The pot won't get enough heat. You will sit here for weeks. But this rice pudding won't cook."
The minister replied,
Your Majesty, when this pot can't get heat from a distance of 10 feet, how could the man get heat from a lamppost? That is very far away.
The king understood what the minister was trying to tell him. The next day, he summoned the man and gave his due reward.